Hi, I'm Landon Breen, and welcome to Crash Course World History on World War II. Now here's the situation the world was in. Germany and the other countries were in shambles following World War I, and were presented with some of the most serious economical crises and problems of that century. This was only made worse by the Great Depression, which was kind of our fault, to be fair. But militarism and fascism were growing. They were spreading, kind of like a cancerous, stupid new game that everybody suddenly wants to play over the weekend, and you're wondering, why haven't I downloaded this? And it's so stupid. On one side, we have the Axis powers at the start of the war, which were causing tensions by the spreading of fascism in the main countries being Germany, Japan, and Italy. Now, Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933 and promised to rebuild the military and get rid of the people he blamed for all the trouble, and started being a jerk, well, first in a large series of jerk moves when he invades Poland in 1941. In 1939, Mussolini in Italy. Let's say that he was less than sane too. Makes you wonder how all these nutjobs got into power in the first place. Mussolini was the leader of Italy at the time and believed that it was his destiny to rule as the modern Caesar, with Italy being his new Rome. He had a heavy involvement in Africa during the war. That's going to be important later on. Now, Japan was quietly building up their forces in the background starting in 1931. Hideki Tojo was the Prime Minister of Japan and one of the many generals for World War II. He was also the one who orchestrated the attack on Pearl Harbor. Interestingly enough, he based his plans on his favorite British novel, which was called The Great Pacific War, which was written 10 years previously and described how Japan could defeat the United States by surprising its naval fleet in Hawaii. The Allied nations at the beginning started mostly with Britain and France, but were later joined by the USSR and America/Canada. Nobody really remembers Canada's involvement in the war, seeing as they're basically like the Hufflepuff of nations when it comes to history. Now, Stalin and Hitler made it a pact not to attack each other, known as the Non-Aggression Pact, but then Hitler's like YOLO and attacks them anyway halfway into the war. When this mistake eventually costs him the war, he finds out that he indeed only lives once. There were several new tactics that were developed during World War II, first and notably of all being Germany's Blitzkrieg attack, which was the German military tactic that allowed them to conquer almost all of Europe in close to a year. This brilliant tactic is one of the reasons that Germany was capable of what they did in the war. It fully utilized the technology that was available to them to mobilize their troops at an alarming rate, which allowed them to smash through their enemy's defensive lines. The general that was in charge of Blitzkrieg ended up being discharged by Hitler when he did not comply to Hitler's whims. This was a surprisingly common trend among the generals of the Third Reich. This caused them to be much less competent in the second half of the war, as Hitler kind of ran out of generals to fire. Anyway, the United States worked on their campaign of island hopping. Now, island hopping was when they tried to get closer to Japan by securing sea routes by jumping, basically island hopping, from one island to the next, kind of like a giant game of Frogger, only with battleships and jungle islands, and lots of mosquitoes. The tide turned against Germany at Stalingrad. The ill-advised and unprepared siege turned into one of the greatest military disasters in history. The Germans were forced to halt their advance into Russia, and the Russians started to push Germany back. They would not stop until they had reached Berlin. This is one of the great classic blunders, which is never get involved in a land war in Asia, unless you're the Mongols. Followed closely by the second classic blunder, which is never argue with a Sicilian when death is on the line. But Mr. Breen, wasn't the turning point in the war for Germany when the Allies invaded the beaches of Normandy on D-Day? Shut up, me from the past. You don't know what you're talking about. I am the star of this show. Me, not you. Not you. Anyway, although D-Day was an important turning point for the U.S. campaign and would have surely caused the defeat of Hitler in Germany, the Russians kind of beat them to Berlin. What is that you say, Alex? Yes, it is time for the mystery document. You have that here. The rules of this are simple. Either I get it right, who wrote the document, or I get shocked. Now let's see. To advocate a new order was to seek freedom and a respect for peoples without prejudice, and to seek a stable basis for the existence of all peoples equally and free of threats. Thus it was to seek true civilization and true justice for all people of the world, and to view this as the destruction of personal freedom, and respect is to be assailed by the hatred and emotion of war, and to make hasty judgments. Now let me see. There are several things that we can draw from what I just said. The new order, so I think we're talking about one of the Axis powers here, probably not the Allies, because it seems that they did not agree with what was going on. To advocate a new order and to speak respect. New order was what Japan was trying to do when they were using their militarism, and I'm guessing that they're not Germany. And the only figure that I really know in Japan that had a document such as this was Hideki Tojo. And I'm correct, and I do not get shocked today, which is good, because I really don't want to get shocked. The victory in the Pacific is the official end of World War II as the last aggressor, Japan, laid down its arms and surrendered unconditionally to the Allied powers. This happens when the two bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, are dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. Now, the atomic bomb, also dubbed the Manhattan Project at the time, was designed to eliminate an entire city with one single device, rather than carpet bombing a city. The original plan for it was presented by Albert Einstein, and the project to complete it was then led by one Robert Oppenheimer, who saw the Manhattan Project to completion. There were then two uses of the bomb in the war that ultimately ended in World War II when we dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, and then another one on Nagasaki, forcing Japan to surrender. Lots of countries at the time were attempting to create a weapon of mass destruction. Do you want to know the reason the US won? Is A, because they had way more time and way more manpower, because that's how we do things in America. So after essentially buying all of the resources that we needed and paying ridiculous sums of money to test the Manhattan Project, we eventually came out on top of the nuclear arms race. And for once, I'm really glad that the United States has a ridiculous military budget. That is also why it is known as the Greatest Generation, because of the sacrifice that was given up for the people to work in the factories and essentially kickstart the war effort that allowed the US to overwhelm the other nations through sheer force of arms. Now, when we say that is the Greatest Generation, we can look in contrast to our generation today, who seems to have forgotten a lot of the sacrifices that have been made for us. If I look at a recent tweet here that has been on the news, wait a minute, does that say hashtag Hitler is my dad? Hashtag YOLO swagging. Done. I'm done. Done. Call me later. Bye. Germany was finally defeated by the Allied powers at the Siege of Berlin in 1945, where the US forces and Russian forces met together on opposing sides of the city. Barricaded in his underground fortress, Hitler took his life and the life of his wife rather than suffer to surrender. Several things happened as a result of the war. First of all, with the Atlantic Charter, all of the Allies agreed that they would not use the war as an opportunity to colonize other places, stopping the seed of imperialism that many nations were worried would grow again and disrupt the cooperation that had happened during World War II by the Allies. Also at this time were the Nuremberg trials, where a lot of people were hanged for the war crimes and the atrocities committed during the Holocaust, where Hitler killed 6 million Jews and an estimated 40 million people total. And after that, on the Yalta Conference, Germany was supposed to be split up and disarmed in an attempt to destroy the Nazism completely. Hi, thanks for watching our Crash Course World History. I'm Landon Breen.
I'm Alex Smith.
And this is the video that we put together. Thanks for enjoying it, and be sure to click subscribe because we're going to be putting this on YouTube because we intend to make some money off of this because it was really hard. But it was also a whole lot of fun to complete.
It was a lot of fun.
So, alright, thank you to all the people that helped us, namely both of us. So, enjoy your class.